All right, welcome back, Alex.
Hello. How are
Are
you?
you ready to go? Are you ready to go on a little journey?
I'm ready to learn. I'm always ready to learn something.
All right. So I thought it might be kind of fun to do a little deep dive. This is going to be like on the superficial side of deep dives because I didn't do a ton of research. I am going off of mostly what I already knew,
Sure.
and a little bit of extra research, as is tradition for us.
Hey, we are
Um,
professional amateurs.
Yes. So we're going to talk about Mike Marshall today, and it was perfect because I texted you about this, and you're like, "Who?"
Yeah.
So Alex and the listener are both going to learn about Mike Marshall today. Now,
This is exciting.
let's. I think a lot of baseball people kind of have some vague awareness of who this guy is, but I don't think they really 100% know just how influential he was in a sense to what we know about pitching today. Uh, and it's an interesting kind of cultural story. So let's start here. So Mike Marshall was a Major League Baseball player. He pitched in uh, he's made his debut in 1967, and he made his last Major League Baseball appearance in 1981. Uh,
It's a
he
pretty good
played
career.
for he had a long career. Um, he played for the Tigers, the team formerly known as the Indians, the Expos, the Seattle Pilots. He had a stint for the Astros, Braves, Rangers. Let's see here. Oh, he played for the Twins. Uh, he won the National League Cy Young Award in 1974. He was three-time saves leader, so he was mostly a relief pitcher. But he was a relief pitcher who logged a really large amount of innings. He threw, let's see here. There was one year in particular, they said he like led the league in innings or something like that. He threw lots of innings for a relief pitcher. This is what I'm looking. This is what I saw. Major League Baseball record 106 games pitched in a single season. So
Holy
he had
Moses.
106 appearances in a single season. So that's the record. He had 880 strikeouts. His ERA was 3.14. Okay. So that's all great and that's all fine and dandy. So he was a pitcher, major league pitcher from the 60s, late 60s to early 80s.
Dude,
But
Eric Gagne had 106 appearances in a year.
that's awesome.
In the
Eric
modern
Gagne.
era. Also
Yeah.
juiced out of his gourd, but still.
Yeah. Eric Gagne rocks.
Dude, that guy was an athlete.
Okay, but that's not really why he's interesting. That's not really why Mike Marshall's interesting. Mike Marshall's interesting because he was a highly educated person in kinesiology. He got his degree from, I think, like Michigan State. Um, he Doctor of Philosophy and Exercise Physiology from Michigan State in 1978. So he was playing Major League Baseball and got his PhD in ex-phys from Michigan State during his Major League Baseball career.
Philosophy and ex-phys.
Doctor of Philosophy, PhD.
Yeah.
Right?
That's sick.
Yeah.
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 That's sweet.
Yes.
I want to be a philosoph. I want to philosophize.
Nailed that. Crushed
Yes. Yeah.
that. So what really makes him interesting though is he has some really like firm, somewhat controversial beliefs about pitching mechanics and injury prevention.
Okay.
So he's highly educated on anatomy. He's highly educated on physiology. And everything about him was very unorthodox, especially for the time. So during my sort of research for this, I found some videos that are very fun. Like he's like kind of talking over the video and he's talking about physiology and he's showing his own video. He's looking at like his delivery from like early in his career.
Mhm.
And he's like, traditional pitching coaches would love this delivery. I coil into my back leg, but this damages the hip socket, the glenohumeral fossa. And like he starts talking about like the You know, he's like, this damages the labrum of the hip.
What year is this? Is this like mid 70s or like late early
The
80s?
the video that I saw, I got the vibe that it was from the 90s.
Okay, that sounds about right.
So
Yeah.
I feel like the 90s was when I'm gonna get some of the timeline pieces of this wrong because it's hard to exactly see like when all of this stuff is really relevant.
I can
Um,
anecdotally I can give you something. So like when my dad was at Valpo, he started in the 80s, like the mid 80s, and then we left in 2000. The shift in the pitching paradigm, like how pitching was coached around when I was like 6 to 8 years old, was huge.
yeah,
It was kind of like what we went through in like 2014, 15, where analytics and like more of the performance side came in. It changed, like it completely changed. It was like up until the point it was like pitchers run the poles and they do lots of long tossing and they want to be skinny and they don't want to be too strong. And then in 2002, he had like three dudes that threw 101 that were like 5'10" to 6'2", just built like brick shit houses. One guy was 6'6" and threw 97, like a complete shift of the type
yeah.
of athlete. And then I feel like this is Marshall kind of comes in at that point and he's like, okay, let me show you some things. Let me teach you some things. Because after we talked, I did a little more research. I was like, okay, yeah, this guy's
Yeah.
the fucking guy.
So here's a little fun thing about not fun at all, but this is one of they said that one of the reasons why he got interested in physiology and stuff is because when he was 11 years old, he
Yeah.
was riding in a car and the car was hit by a train, and his uncle was driving the car.
Yeah.
The car got hit by a train, killed his uncle, and injured Mike Marshall, and he was hospitalized for a while, and that's what like sparked his interest in physiology and injury prevention, stuff like that.
It's a shame his
So
uncle died, but that's, I mean, how do you get hit by a train? How does that happen?
I don't know. It's
It's
just
not like you can't see it coming.
I don't know. I don't know. It's the
I-
70s. I mean, well,
Yeah.
actually,
This
it
would
wasn't
be
the
50s.
70s. It would have been the 50s. So
Yep.
who knows?
Mhm. It might have been
That
even
was
the late 40s. Well, it would have been 11, 18. Yeah, 50s. Yeah, that's pretty
And they-
crazy.
I feel like in the 50s they didn't let you drive unless you were already drunk, so that might have been. Anyway, so he goes through his career and he's very unorthodox about his approach. He's got really, really strong opinions about what you're supposed to do. It obviously worked for him. He was really durable. He stayed healthy throughout the majority of his career. And he was very good, right? When he was done playing was when he really started to get kind of more opinionated about how other people should be training, right?
Mhm.
And you can find some videos that are out there of talking about like how pitching should be done. And when you watch videos of these guys throwing, you would be like, dude, what? You don't know how to. Why are you not? Why are you throwing like that? You don't even know how to throw right. Uh, but it's all about like trying to like decrease torque on the arm and like the hips, and it's really like momentum driven. And so it almost looks like some of the like pivot pick style drills that you would do. Like you're not really decelerating across your body very much. You're kind of like spiraling out of it weird. And a lot of his ideas now if you go, this is like many things in exercise and sports performance, you never go full Marshall, right?
Yeah.
just like how you never go full Cal Dietz, you never go full, like you never go full West Side.
Yep.
But a lot of his ideas are what really sparked Driveline's pitching philosophy, and I'll come back to that. But when Marshall was, when he was initially released from the Twins in 1980, 1981, nobody claimed him off waivers. Nobody wanted to give him a tryout because that's when he started to get more and more outspoken, like later in his career. And he notoriously just like an asshole. Like he's a know-it-all. He's an asshole. He's like really arrogant, and people really don't like him, right? And so this guy got essentially blackballed from Major League Baseball. he's like a quote unquote expert. No
Mhm.
team would hire him to coach. No team would hire him to consult. No team would hire him to play. And no team has ever hired him. And he got like blackballed, even though he was like kind of right about a lot of what he was saying.
Yeah.
One thing was about it was one big thing that he talked about that he's 100% right about is a timing thing. He was talking about how when the front foot lands, like the ball needs to be up, and he called it elbow bounce. But we like, do you remember the people talking about the inverted W?
Yeah.
Right? He called this elbow bounce, where guys would load their arm and like bounce,
Mhm.
like elbow bounce. And
Yeah.
he said that puts stress on the ulnar collateral ligament, and he's correct about that. That puts
Mhm.
stress on the UCL.
Yeah.
So he talked about like he would have guys like supinated, and then they would go up, and then they would like highly pronate. By the way, he threw a screwball, so he was like a big like pronation
So
release
he's
guy.
natural
Uh,
pronator, and then just
yeah,
leaned way into it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so he's been like completely blackballed, but he's still putting a lot of this stuff out there. He's writing. He had a website, and he's writing all this information, and he has like some disciples. You know, they travel to Florida where he lived and like learn from him how to like
Mhm.
throw like morons, and they're like, you know, um, but he's completely blackballed, and nobody will touch him with a 10-foot pole until Driveline comes along, and Driveline starts reading some of this stuff, and they're like, huh, just like me right now, they're like, he kind of has a point about some of this stuff. And it's really interesting because I think a lot of people are like, um, oh, Driveline ripped off Mike Marshall's stuff. Like they just took the
See,
because
this is
Marshall,
okay. This is the stuff I've heard. This is the Mike
yeah,
Marshall talk I've heard from like hundreds of people. They're like, Driveline's not even original. They took all of Mark Marshall's stuff. And it's like,
yeah,
okay, well, like you and I've talked about on here a million times. The chances anybody is having a truly original thought, unless you're freaking Socrates, pretty small. Like we're
yeah.
all
Well,
just pilfering little pieces of things from everybody else, and then we're just putting them together in a slightly different way, but it's the same premise.
yeah. Well, and here's what's really funny. It took me 10 seconds to find Driveline articles
Right.
very specifically citing Mike Marshall's work.
Love that.
Um,
Yep.
they didn't steal anything. This article right here, 2011 on Driveline's website, reviewing ASMI's biomechanical analysis of Dr. Marshall's pitchers, focus, performance, and velocity. And this is a fairly long article talking about the performance philosophy of Dr. Mike Marshall.
Mhm.
Um, they took some of the videos of Marshall's pitchers. Uh, they they completely cite all of it, and it's really interesting because people are like, "Oh, they just rebranded and said the Drive line instead of the Marshall line," and blah blah blah. It's like, well, no. I, here's an article from 2010. Our influences pitching, National Pitching Association. Tom House, The Art and Science of Pitching. Mike Marshall, controversial? You bet. Dr. Marshall has reinvented the pitching motion and has been teaching it for years in his Zephyr Hills, Florida complex. Their pitchers stand facing the batter, step directly straight forward, and utilize a unique arm action that focuses on getting the arm up early and forcefully pronating through release. His training methods include heavy wrist weights, lead balls, and plastic javelins to train his concept of a straight drive line towards his target.
Mm.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, they totally stole it.
Yeah, they didn't credit him at all. Not even a little bit.
Yeah. Now, let me show you this video. Let me screen share for a moment because this is great. We're gonna just you're just gonna experience this with me.
I'm in. I love an old timey pitching video. It's one of my favorites. It's crazy. The '90s, 30 years ago. Oh yeah, here we go.
This is super 90s too because like the lighting, you can tell like the high speed camera they had to like they couldn't just use a phone for this, you
Yeah,
know. But look how
and
he's facing. There's no real wind up. Look at his back foot, and then he steps like real
open.
open, and then he's like, ready. So
Ooh.
you can see the javelin influence there for
You,
sure.
yeah, dude. I mean, you could even argue this is kind of top velocity E,
Yeah, well,
like that,
everybody,
like that
but
direct back foot. But that is such a
yeah,
weird, like, that
Whether they
pronation.
whether
Oh,
whether they want to admit it or not, everybody's been influenced by this.
oh yeah. It's such a strange, and like you're still definitely loading the.
This is such bad audio. Sorry for
Oh.
anybody. Sorry for anybody who's only listening.
So to describe it to you guys, imagine you have your chest facing a wall. Okay, you have your feet facing a wall, and then someone says, "Okay, I want you to throw something as hard as you possibly can without your chest ever turning more than like 45 degrees from the wall you're facing." So you
Let's
basically
see.
look like you're about to
Let's,
do a cartwheel, and
yeah.
then imagine trying to do a cartwheel and then throwing a baseball
Yeah.
or any type of object. It's very strange. It like you it doesn't look like javelin throwing. It doesn't look like baseball throwing. It doesn't look really like anything. What it looks like, okay, if you've ever stepped and thrown with the same arm and same foot, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
If
That's
that's
what
exactly what it looks like.
his back foot comes through really weirdly early.
Yeah,
Um, you know what it looks like though? It looks like a roll in, right? Like a lot of
100%.
roll ins are like this is kind of the roll in drill, and that's what I'm getting at. Is like
Mhm.
it looks like drill work that people use to then emphasize certain elements of the delivery, right? And I think I'll say this now that we don't have to like wait to the end to like sort of draw this conclusion.
That
Like
dude,
everybody out
yeah,
there, Marshall is right about a lot and he's wrong about a lot, right?
yeah,
Like one thing that he's right about is like this might be a really good way to prevent arm injuries, but if you read some of these driveline articles, kind of like citing his stuff and kind of like talking through it, one thing he didn't doesn't really acknowledge is the trade-off. Like
right.
you could throw that way and prevent injuries, but the decrease in performance that you're going to have is so big that it's not worth it. Like you're not going to be good. Yeah,
No,
you'll stay healthy, but you're not going to be good throwing that way. And that's kind of the problem with a lot of this stuff is like, yeah, sure. If you pitched in the 70s and you could get by throwing screwballs and spitballs and swerve balls and
swerve
tobacco
balls.
balls and cocaine balls, like yeah, that'll work. But nowadays in today's game, like you've got to maximize your performance and minimizing injury risk is important, but it's more important to make sure that you can actually be good at the game.
Well, I think the other part too is like if you are legitimately working on the game, like getting better at the game, your risk is going to go down because your skill is going to go up so much. And yeah, you might get hurt because you're performing at a higher level and your like volume goes up and the stress of training goes up. But the you can't if you place what is it? Scared money don't make money. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
You want to play with the big dogs, you get off the porch, that kind of thing. Like you got to just throw yourself into the fray and see if you can actually handle it. And I think the biggest issue is like if you're throwing like that, you're not going to ever, like you said, you're probably, unless you're Mike Marshall, you're probably never going to achieve that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like you're never going to achieve. Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
stance on it. It's like are you really going to get that immense increase that it takes to become a professional and
Right.
have a 14-year career, unless your name's Mike frickin' Marshall and you just happen to be gifted. I mean, if you look at the video that we just watched, guys, the spine on the guy in that video moves about as much as a piece of plywood.
Yeah.
Like it is the inverse of what we see of most high level throwers. And I don't know if
Yeah.
that was just a guy they chose to demonstrate the video, but it's like it's not the like Zach said, he nailed it. There's a lot of good parts and a lot of bad parts. Good parts of Mike Marshall, he's the first person to really start putting out information that people could use, like things that
Based on
that are digestible.
right, and the information was based on correct anatomy and physiology, which I get the feeling that a lot of traditional pitching information was sort of your like high school coach's idea of anatomy, right? Mike
100%.
Marshall was highly educated on anatomy. He
Mm-hmm.
talked about a lot of very specific things. Now, what he did that happens to a lot of guys is that he gets too educated on anatomy, and when he watches somebody move, all he sees is like damaged parts. He's like, "Oh no,
It's
that's going
hard
to damage the
sometimes.
glenohumeral fossa."
Yeah, man, it's hard sometimes because that is like I love anatomy. Like I was an anatomist. I'm like an anatomist to like my core, and it is sometimes hard to watch things happen and then be like, okay, don't say anything. Like
Yeah.
they're fine. They're gonna be okay. Like sometimes I watch guys throw and I'm like, oh man, that looks like that hurts. And but you can't like you have to let everyone find their own route, right? So it's like that's the part that is motor learning. So you can't perfect something that hasn't been done. Like we get really good example is that we got a couple new guys that came in and it's like you can tell that they either grew a lot recently or haven't grown much, or they got a lot stronger really fast and their body hasn't adapted and they just don't, it's like they've forgotten how to throw.
Hmm.
But they'll have flashes of like everything lines up and it looks really good, and then you're like, hey, just okay, do you remember that one? Do that again, because that looked like that didn't hurt. Or like we got a couple guys that are like that that are dealing with arm issues and they're like 70% of my reps are great and then the ones where I don't concentrate suck. And it's like, yeah, yeah. Like you're not good enough at it yet to just go on autopilot and like rip the ball. So yeah, I think this like that's a good way to show Mike Marshall, and like the Sensi did a really good job of just like introing kind of who he was. But really, I think you're right. He is the modern day, like he's the reason that we do a lot of the stuff we do now, or
He's
he's
the
the
reason we throw
beginning of
weighted
it.
balls.
He is.
So coming back to that too, like he was the very first guy to throw different weighted objects, the wrist weights, the wrist weight thing that you see people do where they're like
Mm-hmm.
flipping into pronation. That's a Mike Marshall thing. That's a Mike
Yep.
Marshall influence. Mike Marshall would have guys down to that complex in Florida and they'd be like throwing like lead, like shot put style
Love that.
weights because like they didn't have like plyo balls manufactured yet, right? So he's just hucking like chunks of iron,
Rocks,
Yeah,
big heavy rocks.
and uh, and he's got these guys like doing all this more like interval type throwing, which was really controversial, as you know, back in the day. Like
Yeah.
you're not just throwing a baseball. That's insane,
Yeah.
right?
Or
And it's so interesting because had he just been a nicer guy about it,
he'd
it
be
makes me really
legendary.
wonder. Yeah, it goes to show it doesn't matter how much you know or how correct you are. It just matters whether or not you can get people to buy into what you're saying.
Tale of two cities, man.
Yeah.
It's a story of life. I mean, great example as we look at the Hall of Fame, right? David Ortiz, nice guy, got caught with steroids in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, not nice guys. Technically, didn't get caught with steroids, not in the Hall of Fame. And I would argue that both of those players are much better than the other. I'd make that argument till I'm blue in the face.
These are the facts, people. These are the facts.
But that's cool. I think I think everybody who went through all of that stuff so that you and I can do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're kind of intelligent, but we are not smart enough. We could not do like that unless it was forced upon us. Unless like there was something that happened that was dramatic or drastic. Like to have people who are original thought creators or thinkers, even if they are like maniacs, allows us to do this kind of stuff because it has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and the maniacs always take it too far, right?
Yep.
Like I said, like nobody throws like that in game because
Mm-hmm.
it's ridiculous, and
Yep.
you wouldn't be able to actually pitch well. But it lays the groundwork for other people to be kind of brave enough to utilize the training methods, to borrow certain concepts, to build upon it, right,
Mm-hmm.
into what we know today
Right.
as uh, really widely accepted pitching philosophy now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Utilizing weighted balls has become so ubiquitous that I was talking to one of our groups of high school kids in one of our practices, and you watch them go through their plyo ball drills. They all know the drills now, but you watch them and you can tell that there isn't that same level of intent that you might expect.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped him. I said, what's this for? What is this drill for? What are you trying to accomplish with this drill, with this ball? And they look at you and they're like, it's to throw harder. Like, yeah, but
Sure.
no, but it for in the span of what 15 years, 20 years, it went from nobody would ever even consider doing it,
Right.
to it's so commonplace that kids just do it just because, like, that's what pitchers do, right?
Dude, it was taboo to throw heavy balls when I was in college. It's not
Yeah,
even a decade ago. And I played at a pretty high level. People were like, "Oh, we can't do plyos. That's hard on your arm. It'll throwing heavy stuff will hurt you." And it's like, and now we go, well, it just makes you better. Like it's a very simple transaction. Like throwing something more difficult than the thing you're going to throw is going to yield a better end result. It's literally weight training. It's the
yeah,
same thing. And it's not like the ligaments in your, I don't know. We've talked about that a million times, but you're right. It's become so commonplace that it's become like the apathy towards doing that type of drill work versus I remember even when we first started this pitching programming that we do 5 years ago, not even, it was a completely different thing. Like throwing the plows was like a deal we did. It was like, okay, this is very important. This is going to take time. And now I'm like, okay, let's make sure we're doing them correctly at least. Let's like have an intent to do it. And the guys are just like, oh, we're just throwing them, whatever. So I totally agree with that, man. That's a really good way to look at it. I seriously, this is the first time I've thought back to like when I was young and I was at the university with coach with my dad, and the shift in how pitching was from when I was like when I started understanding like coaching, like being coached, to what it was when we left in just like a 5 year span. It's it was nuts. We went from having like a guy who pitched professionally and was like in his 30s to having a dude who just got out of the game pitching professionally and he was like 24, and completely different styles. Like it was unbelievable the difference, and it was over like a course of 3 years. It was nuts. It was absolutely insane. It was
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. It is crazy, and it also goes to show like the guys who are brave enough to use themselves as their test tubes are
Mm-hmm.
almost always the pioneers. Like
Yep.
if you've got the balls to try something on yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yep.
Those are the guys who always kind of lead the way in cultural changes and methods, techniques,
Mm-hmm.
training systems, etc. You know,
Well,
you see
you
you see that in not just baseball. You see that in bodybuilding, track and field. You know,
the
a lot of
the
stuff.
best the best teacher's experience.
Yeah.
The only way you and I talk about this all the time, and it's something that we've said on this podcast, but like if you're working with athletes and not you're not training, you're not throwing in some capacity, you're not experiencing these things or like trying and testing what you do, like that's one of the reasons that I think it's like I have to stay in good enough shape to continue to throw because I need to experience where the guys are at volume wise. I need to know what it feels like to be like where they're at with their bodies and like to be beat up and to feel that, because it makes me way more connected to what they're doing. If I'm just over here just like plugging away into a computer, okay, how's that? Is that pretty good? Like we're not part of it. Same thing, like you train just as much as your guys do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what it's like to be in that bottom part of the training cycle where you're like, okay, we're all beat up right now. We need to come back up to the top. You have to experience these things. And if you are too afraid, like you said, to get in the dirt, get muddy, and like be in there and make mistakes with your athletes or with whoever you're working with, then you're not experiencing, like you're disconnected. You're not going to give them the best version of what they can get. And it takes sometimes just being like, fuck it.
Mm-hmm.
If I get hurt, at least it's me getting hurt and not the person that I'm working with getting hurt. Like, let me try this first to make sure that it's worth doing and see if it's even, otherwise it's like, well, let's use supposition and mathematics. And it's like, that's not how high level performance works at
Yeah.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a pet peeve of mine about evidence based
Hmm.
sports science with,
Yeah.
well, this study, according to this study,
Yeah.
and I'm always kind of like, well, you know, are you 100% sure that the athletes that they studied are close enough to the athletes that you're training
Yeah.
in every way that that's applicable, or is it, is it a
Hmm.
different thing? Untrained collegiate males versus trained collegiate males versus adolescents versus adults versus, you know, like it's all, it's very different animals a lot of times, right? And then when you're working with athletes with sports too, it's like now you're introducing a lot more variables as well. I was just explaining that to a group of kids the other day. Like, it's a moving target.
Oh
You
yeah.
can't be as precise as we want to be because you're trying to hit a moving target from a moving train.
Mhm.
It's it's not it's not that easy.
No,
So
from a moving
you have
train. That's a really good way to put it.
yeah, yeah. So it's important that I think we all understand this. But I thought that was like a fun little short semi deep dive because it is an interesting character. And everybody, like, nobody, he died in 2021, but um,
Oh, wow, that
nobody
was
in
a good
baseball,
run.
nobody in baseball liked this guy. Nobody in baseball really wanted to listen to him, but there was just enough people that were like, maybe this crazy bastard in Florida has a point. That they were able to pick and pull and learn and take little nuggets and really start to build what we all kind of agree on today. And I think a lot of the stuff he was taking things that think people were maybe already doing. Like, he was talking about extension towards the plate, getting the acromial line like pointed towards the plate at release, and like that's just extension. That's not that
Right.
crazy of a thought. But he was able to give like physiological reasoning behind it, which is valuable.
Yeah.
He was able to challenge the sort of status quo, which in and of itself is often valuable. Just stopping and thinking and saying, like, asking, is this traditional line of thinking actually correct? And maybe you draw the conclusion that it is. You know, maybe you're like, no, this guy's wrong. But it's important to ask yourself that every now and then, right? Um, Being brave enough to try new training methods and see if they work, right? You know, that's one thing that people like Louis Simmons, I think, in the strength and conditioning world is very similar to Mike Marshall
Same
in
guy.
the baseball world,
Yeah.
right?
Same guy. Everybody hated him.
Louis didn't have the traditional education, but people really came around on Louis. But people forget, like, people hated Louis Simmons for a long time. They were like, who does this fucking guy think he is? You know, like, he read one book and then he's got rubber bands and thinks he knows better. But they had all the world records, you know, and he
They
was
still
brave
do.
enough. Yeah, he was brave enough to try all this stuff on him and his little like discipleship in his garage. You know,
Yep.
like, here, try 1,000 pounds in band tension, see what happens. Yeah. Oh
Guys.
shit. You broke all of your vertebrae. Sorry about that.
Hold on. Let me build you a machine that'll fix your back.
Yeah. Oh, sorry that I shattered all of your vertebrae. Let me build a machine that'll fix it.
I still say this. The reverse hyper is seriously, it is like there are two things that are credited to Louis Simmons. It's the adaptation of like using bands and like adaptive load. That's amazing. I think it's one of those things that as an experienced lifter, it's something that is so valuable. But the other thing is, like, for rehab purposes, man, a reverse hyper machine is one of the most like versatile pieces of equipment, and it freaking works. Guess what?
Yeah.
Your back hurts. Get on there and pop off 20 sets over the course of a few days. You're going to feel way better. Like, it's going to fix it. Even if your disc is all messed up and you have arthritis in your back, guess what? Sitting on there and getting to the distraction, it's going to feel amazing. But it's so true. Like, but he was a maniac. Louis Simmons was a maniac. Absolute maniac.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember the first time that someone like kind of brought these topics up to me, and this is in like 2013. It was for sprint training, like speed training. He's got like a couple books, like West Side Method to Speed or whatever. And they're not wrong. They work.
So
I got really fast, doing that.
It's a lot like Mike Marshall in that he was so bought into his philosophy and his methods that he's like, this will work for everything. I could build an Olympic sprinter. Yeah, no problem. Of course I could. Why wouldn't I? You know? And you're like, okay, well, how many Olympic sprinters are using your methods? None? Okay, well, maybe you could make an average person way faster, but probably not elite world class speed,
Yeah.
because it's maybe too taxing, too stressful. But I was thinking about the line from the documentary that they made
Mm.
about the invention of the reverse hyper, and he's like, I saw on TV that Larry Bird had to retire because he had a bad back. Well, I thought if he had a reverse hyper, he wouldn't have a bad back. Like, just the matter of factness of that
Mm.
statement really goes to show, like, just how, like, these pioneers, the level of arrogance that they have to have in order to be brave enough to
Yeah.
innovate the way that they do. Like, just hand wave, like flippant. Yeah, well, if he had one of these, he wouldn't have a bad back. Like,
No
he
problem. I
knows
would fix that.
absolutely nothing about
Yeah.
why he has a bad back. He knows nothing about basketball. Knows nothing about Larry Bird. He's just like, well, if he fucking had a reverse hyper, he wouldn't have that fucking problem.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm.
and that's what I absolutely love about these guys, because like they just, whatever that is, the imposter syndrome, the like self second guessing, they just don't have
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
They don't
Mhm.
have it at all, and
Mhm.
it's like I feel like some envy about that, because I'm all imposter syndrome. I am an imposter.
We're both. I mean, realistically, I don't think I'm smart enough to understand the like. If I have imposter syndrome, I think it's more so the fact that it's just like I'm doing my best, and this is what you're gonna get. And if this isn't good enough for you, then I can't give you any more than what I've given you. So I'm gonna go to bed. Like I had this exact conversation with Zimmerman the other day. He goes, because my brother has like, we're on a tangent here, but my brother suffers from anxiety, and he goes, "Have you ever been like anxious about what other people think about you?" And I was like, I don't think I'm smart enough to think about that. I was like, I don't think. I was like, I don't know. I was like, well, and then at the end of the day, I was like, I can't control what they think about me. I'm just out here doing my best, And Zimmerman goes, that keeps me up at night every night. I was like, let it go, brother. It'll never let it go, man. Let it go, man. It ain't gonna
I'm too
make any difference
stupid to have
anyway.
anxiety.
Hey, you ever gone out and just eaten some grass? It's not so bad. But no, yeah, I think that's great that there are other dumb idiots like me out there that are just smarter than I am, and they make grandiose claims, and they put themselves into the fray. Yeah, I without those people, we would not get to do what we do every day, which is like perfect example. The guy who invented chiropractic, fucking moron. But I'm a chiropractor. I get to have that licensure because there are a bunch of people who are quacky enough to be like, you know what? We should make this a doctorate. We should call these
Wasn't he
people
a?
doctors.
Is it true that the guy that invented chiropractic practice was a mailman?
I believe so. Let me see.
That's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true or not. I never bothered fact checking that.
B.J. Palma, American chiropractor. He looks like a quack. Born in 1882 in
Our
Whatcheer,
connection is
Iowa.
suffering. There we go.
Yes. Oh, it is. Is it bad? 1 second. I'm looking this up.
He was born in 1882.
Yeah, 1882. 1922, Parker purchased a local radio station. And called the WOC, the Wonders of Chiropractic is what he called. Oh my God. Questioned involvement in his father's death.
Ooh.
Whoa. All right. It doesn't really say. I don't really care anyway. But yeah. I don't know. He was a chiropractor.
Honestly, born in 1882 gives me everything I need to know.
Yeah, man. He's, dude.
Like, chiropractic is the medical equivalent of, like, oh, you got a cough? Here's some opium.
My profession is not the most esteemed, but that's okay. We're doing our best. Like I said, we're doing our best. Yeah, he's it's the same thing though. Like without a guy like that who bought a radio station and possibly killed his father, where would I be?
That's a great point. Well, you'd probably be working construction somewhere.
I would be slinging packages out of the back of a bot for sure. Or no, I'd probably work cement. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I'd be a cement guy for sure. I'd be laying rebar, freaking slinging.
Rebar guy.
Yeah, that'd be me. Yeah. Hey, you lift that up. Okay. That would be it.
Okay.
Okay. That'd be it. All right, man. That's all I got today, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, we're off the rails. That's all right.
If you stuck around this long, we appreciate you. Share it with a friend. Tell them it's
Yeah.
good, clean living.
Like, follow, share, rate, 5 stars. All right, that's the pod.
Bye.
Bye bye.